Movies love quicksand, and why not? It's exotic, it's dramatic, and it's highly exaggerated. Fun fact, it's actually impossible to become fully submerged in quicksand the way you see in films. But that doesn't mean quicksand isn't dangerous. So what could actually happen to you if you fell into it? This is What If. And here's what would happen if you fell into quicksand. The movie myths. Hollywood gets it wrong. If you grew up watching adventure movies, you probably think quicksand is one of the most terrifying natural hazards on Earth. Characters in films stumble into innocent-looking patches of sand and immediately start sinking. They thrash around desperately, screaming for help as they're slowly pulled under. Within minutes, they've disappeared completely beneath the surface, swallowed by the hungry sand. It's dramatic, it's terrifying, and it's almost completely wrong. Hollywood has portrayed quicksand as a death trap that will swallow you whole if you're unlucky enough to step in it. Entire expedition parties have been lost to quicksand in movies. Treasure hunters sink to their doom. Explorers disappear without a trace. Their hats floating on the surface is the only evidence they were ever there. The reality is much less dramatic, but still worth understanding, because quicksand is a real phenomenon that exists in various places around the world. You just won't sink completely under like in the movies. The actual physics of quicksand makes full submersion essentially impossible for humans, but you can still get stuck, injured, or even die under certain circumstances. So let's understand what quicksand actually is and what would really happen if you fell into it. Beach physics. Why you don't sink in normal sand. Before we talk about quicksand specifically, let's understand why you don't normally sink into sand when you walk on a beach. The reason has to do with a physics phenomenon known as force chain distribution. Basically, when billions upon billions of grains of sand are jammed together in one place, they form a stable structure. Each grain is supported by the grains around it and beneath it, creating chains of force that distribute weight across a large area. Think of it like a crowd of people standing shoulder to shoulder. If you tried to walk across the tops of their heads, your weight would be distributed across many people, and the structure would hold. That's essentially what's happening when you walk on sand. Your weight is being distributed across countless grains, and the force chains keep you from sinking. This is why you and your camels can safely walk across desert sand without sinking. The sand grains are packed together tightly enough that they support your weight. The force of your body pressing down gets distributed across millions of grains, and each grain bears only a tiny fraction of your total weight. Dry sand is particularly stable because the grains have high friction between them. They don't slide past each other easily. This friction, combined with the force chain distribution, creates a surface that's solid enough to walk on, drive on, or even build on in some cases. How quicksand forms when sand stops being solid. But what happens if water seeps up from underground and mixes with the sand? That's when things change dramatically, and quicksand can form. Quicksand forms when water saturates sand from below, usually from an underground spring or water source. The water fills the spaces between the sand grains and creates a suspension, sand particles floating in water rather than resting firmly on each other. This breaks those force chains we talked about. When the sand grains are suspended in water, they're no longer locked together through friction. They can move past each other much more easily. The structure loses its stability. What looked like solid ground is actually closer to a very thick liquid with sand floating in it. The tricky part is that quicksand looks solid on the surface. The top layer might appear dry or only slightly damp. You can't easily tell the difference between normal wet sand and actual quicksand just by looking at it. This is why people step into it by accident. It looks completely safe until you put your weight on it. Quicksand typically forms in areas where water can easily rise up through sand. This includes riverbanks, lake shores, beaches, marshes, and areas near underground springs. Anywhere that water can seep upward through sandy soil is a potential quicksand zone. Why you won't sink completely? The density difference. It's true that real quicksand isn't like what you see in the movies. The reason you won't sink all the way under is because of two important facts. Quicksand is rarely very deep, and humans are less dense than quicksand. First, the depth issue. Most quicksand formations are only a few feet deep. You might sink waist deep or chest deep in extreme cases, but you're not going to disappear completely beneath the surface in most situations. The quicksand simply isn't deep enough for that. Second, and more importantly, humans are only about half as dense as quicksand. Your body has a density of roughly 1 gram per cubic centimeter, about the same as water, which is why you can float. Quicksand, on the other hand, has a density of about 2 grams per cubic centimeter because it's a mixture of water and much denser sand particles. Because you're less dense than quicksand, you'll naturally float in it to some degree, just like you float in water. Physics dictates that you can't sink deeper than the point where your body displaces an amount of quicksand equal to your weight. For most people, that means you really couldn't sink much lower than your waist, or perhaps your chest at the absolute worst. So you won't disappear beneath the surface like in the movies. But that doesn't mean you're safe. The non-Newtonian nightmare, when quicksand becomes liquid. Here's where things get dangerous. Quicksand is what scientists call a non-Newtonian fluid, meaning its viscosity. Its thickness or resistance to flow changes depending on the stress applied to it. In normal fluids like water or oil, the viscosity stays relatively constant. Water is always thin and flows easily. Honey is always thick and flows slowly. But non-Newtonian fluids behave differently depending on how much force or stress you apply to them. Quicksand is a specific type of non-Newtonian fluid called a shear thinning fluid. This means it becomes less viscous, more liquid-like when you apply stress to it. Under high stress conditions like being under the weight of your body or experiencing the force of your movements, quicksand changes its consistency. It becomes more liquid, causing you to sink. So if you panic and start frantically trying to get out, you're actually making things worse. Every rapid movement you make applies stress to the quicksand around you, causing it to become more liquid. The rapid shifting of your weight creates pressure waves in the quicksand that break down its structure even further. This will only suck you down deeper and faster. The more you thrash around, the more the quicksand behaves like a liquid, and the deeper you sink. It's counterintuitive because your instinct when you're sinking is to struggle and fight. But with quicksand, that instinct will get you killed. The waiting trap, when doing nothing, makes it worse. On the other hand, quicksand also gets thicker over time if you stop moving. Remember, it's a non-Newtonian fluid. When you stop applying stress to it, the opposite effect happens. It becomes more viscous, thicker, more solid-like. So if you just hang around and do nothing, waiting for rescue without trying to free yourself, the quicksand will gradually become thicker and harder to move through. It will begin to grip your legs like setting concrete. What was liquid becomes paste, and eventually becomes almost solid around your trapped limbs. This means you're stuck between two bad options. Move too much and you sink deeper. Don't move at all and you get locked in place. It's a trap either way if you don't know what you're doing. The time factor. Every minute counts. Every minute you're stuck in quicksand increases the risks to your life, and not all of those risks are from the quicksand itself. First, there's exposure. If you're stuck outdoors in quicksand for hours, you'll face dehydration, especially in hot climates. The sun beating down on you with no shade and no water to drink will cause severe dehydration relatively quickly. You might have only a few hours before dehydration becomes life-threatening. Starvation is a longer-term concern, but still relevant if you're stuck for days. Your body needs energy, and being stuck in quicksand is exhausting. The physical effort of trying to stay afloat, combined with the stress and fear, burns calories rapidly. Sunstroke is another serious risk in hot environments. With no shade and unable to move to cooler areas, your body temperature can rise to dangerous levels. Sunstroke can cause confusion, loss of consciousness, and death. On the flip side, if you're in a cold environment or stuck overnight, hypothermia becomes the threat. Your core body temperature can drop dangerously low, especially if you're partially submerged in cold, wet quicksand. And if that doesn't give you chills, those hungry-looking eyes in the distance might. Depending on where you are, predators might take an interest in an immobilized human. You'd be completely defenseless, unable to run or fight back effectively while trapped waist-deep in quicksand. The drowning risk, when the tide becomes your enemy. Depending on where you are, you might even drown in quicksand, which adds a terrifying time limit to your situation. Quicksand is often found near the sea or along coastlines because it's easier for water to rise up through the sand in these areas. The water table is high and tidal forces can push water up through sandy sediments. This creates perfect conditions for quicksand formation. So if you're ever caught in quicksand near the coast, you need to be acutely aware of the time. Keep an eye on the tide schedule. At best, you'll only have about 6 hours before the tide changes from low to high. When high tide comes in, the water level will rise. If you're stuck in quicksand on a beach or tidal flat, the incoming tide will gradually cover you. You could drown in just a few feet of water because you can't lift yourself up or move to higher ground. The quicksand holds your legs in place while the water rises over your head. This has actually happened to people. There are documented cases of individuals who got stuck in quicksand on beaches and couldn't free themselves before the tide came in. It's one of the most terrifying ways quicksand can kill you. The escape method. How to actually survive. If not trying to escape and trying too hard are both bad choices, then what are you supposed to do if you get stuck in quicksand? The trick is to stay calm. This is easier said than done when you're sinking into the ground, but panic will kill you. Take deep breaths. Accept that you're not going to sink all the way under. Remind yourself that you're less dense than the quicksand and you will float to some degree. First, get rid of any heavy items you're wearing or carrying. Backpacks, heavy coats, tools, weapons, anything with significant weight needs to go. These items will drag you deeper by increasing your overall density and adding more weight for the quicksand to pull down. Drop them or toss them onto solid ground if possible. Next, try to lean as far back as you can to create more space around your legs. This is counterintuitive because you feel like you should be trying to stand upright or pull yourself straight up. But leaning back actually helps in several ways. When you create space between your body and the quicksand by leaning back, water will flow in to fill those gaps. Water is much less viscous than the quicksand mixture, so having water around your legs instead of thick quicksand makes it easier for you to move. The water essentially lubricates the area around your trapped limbs. Move very slowly and gently. Make small, deliberate movements rather than large, panicked ones. You're trying to wiggle your legs free gradually without creating the stress that makes quicksand more liquid. Think of it like moving through thick honey. Slow, patient movements work better than violent thrashing. If you can grab a stick, branch, or any long object, wedge it underneath your back. This will help to increase your leverage and distribute your weight more effectively. You're essentially trying to increase your surface area so you're floating on top of the quicksand rather than sinking into it. Hopefully you'll get help from emergency services if someone knows you're missing and can locate you. But if not, you can use these techniques to slowly work yourself free. Call for help if you can. Use your phone if you still have it. Make noise to attract attention. The physics of extraction, lifting a car with your legs. It will be a long and exhausting process to escape quicksand. Here's why. The physics of pulling yourself out requires an enormous amount of force. Scientists have calculated that just to free your foot from quicksand, moving at a rate of only 1 centimeter per second, would require the same amount of force that it takes to lift a small car. That's roughly 100,000 newtons of force. Why does it require so much force? It's because of the suction effect created by the quicksand's viscosity. When you try to pull your leg up, you create a vacuum below your foot. The quicksand resists this vacuum by creating suction that pulls your leg back down. The thicker the quicksand around your leg, the stronger this suction effect. This is why people often can't pull themselves out through brute force alone. Your leg muscles simply aren't strong enough to generate the 100,000 newtons of force needed to overcome the suction. Even if you're very strong, you probably can't lift a small car with your legs, which means you can't just yank your legs out of quicksand. That's why the slow, patient method of creating space and letting water flow in is so important. You're not trying to overpower the suction. You're trying to reduce it by making the quicksand around your legs less viscous and by eliminating the vacuum effect. Emergency responders who rescue people from quicksand often use techniques involving water jets or hoses to inject water around the trapped person's legs. This dramatically reduces the viscosity and suction, making extraction much easier. The aftermath: injury and trauma. Once you're finally free from the quicksand, you'll probably be in a lot of pain. The ordeal isn't over just because you've escaped. With all that pressure from the densely packed sand and the suction forces pulling on your legs, you might emerge from the quicksand with serious injuries. The most common injury is nerve damage in your legs and feet from the sustained pressure and reduced blood flow. If you were stuck for a long time, hours or more, the lack of blood circulation to your lower extremities can cause tissue damage. Your legs might be numb, painful, or difficult to move. In extreme cases, you could suffer from compartment syndrome, where swelling cuts off blood flow and damages muscles and nerves. Some people have actually lost legs to quicksand, not from it crushing their legs directly, but from the aftermath of being trapped. The combination of pressure, lack of circulation, and the physical trauma of extraction can result in injuries severe enough to require amputation. Even if you come out physically intact, you'll likely be exhausted, dehydrated, possibly hypothermic or suffering from heat exposure, and traumatized by the experience. You'll need medical attention even if you manage to free yourself without visible injuries. The psychological impact shouldn't be underestimated either. Being trapped and helpless for hours, facing the real possibility of death, is a traumatic experience that can cause lasting anxiety and fear. Conclusion: respect the sand. So what actually happens if you fall into quicksand? You probably won't sink all the way under like in the movies, but you can still get seriously stuck, injured, or even killed if you don't know what to do. The key is staying calm, moving slowly, increasing your surface area, and patiently working yourself free. Panic is your enemy. Knowledge is your friend. If you do manage to come out in one piece, maybe tread a little more carefully in the future. Pay attention to the terrain you're walking on. Avoid areas that look suspiciously wet or unstable. And if you're exploring near water or in marshy areas, let someone know where you're going and when you'll be back. But don't let this one potentially sucky experience keep you from adventure. Just be smart about it. Put your best foot forward and take a walk on the wild side. Just watch where you're stepping. If you enjoyed learning about the real dangers of quicksand versus the Hollywood myths, subscribe for more explorations of survival scenarios and the science behind natural phenomena. Stay curious and stay safe out there.